Welcome, everyone. This is Mariusz Konieczny, and I think it is time to do an update on Plurilock Security. So I am here with Ian Patterson to do an update. Thank you very much, Ian, for joining me.
Thanks. Good to be back.
There's quite a bit of news in about cybersecurity space, especially lately we had a Google acquisition. So I was wondering if you could talk about what's going on in the industry and maybe touch upon this acquisition.
Well, I think that cybersecurity can sometimes be the sleeping giant. I think a lot of times there are some thematics that get really popular and they come and go. AI is one. Quantum is also another one that's kind of gotten really popular and then kind of got a little bit quiet. And yet in the background, cybersecurity continues to chug along. And I think what we saw this past week, in fact, was Google made an acquisition of a company called Wiz. Wiz, for those who might remember, was in the news last year around talks of potential IPO, potential acquisition, etc. And my understanding is that Google is paying $32 billion for this company, which is more than all of the rest of the acquisitions combined that Google had done previously. So Wiz is a cloud security company. They've been very fast growing. But I think really what this says is that Google thinks that there's 32 billion reasons why cybersecurity matters. And this is just a great reminder to investors to keep an eye on cybersecurity as a whole.
This is what's going on in the cybersecurity space. How does this translate into your business, maybe deals in the pipeline or anything that you can share with us?
Well, I think what this shows at a high level from the external is that cybersecurity is very valuable, right? We have a very large hyperscaler who's putting a huge chunk of cash to work to go buy a company, Wiz. And so, I mean, what we're seeing is that cybersecurity continues to matter more than ever, regardless of what's happening with geopolitics, with kind of the state of the economy, inflation, whatever. Cybersecurity continues to be very steady in terms of the needs that our customers have. I mean, I'll tell you from our perspective, I've already ramped up our sales team this past spring. This was something that we wanted to do going into this calendar year. And so we've been successful on that. I'd also say that we're seeing a lot more activity faster with particularly some of our newer sales reps, which is extremely positive. I think the other thing is that we've already made some announcements around partnerships. There's a lot more that we want to do, specifically around solidifying our presence in the ecosystem and kind of the other components of that around us, so the additional partners. And all of this is extremely positive. Now, it's positive for us. I think what this does represent is that there's still a lot of vulnerabilities out there that companies have, as well as the public sector. As you know, we do a lot in the public sector for allied countries, US, Canada, etc. And there's a lot more that we want to do. I think in addition to that, we're also starting to get recognized. We announced a series of awards, not just one, but a series really relating to both the company as well as critical services, because people are starting to notice now the impacts that we're having and rewarding us for that. So things are busy, things are good. I think the other thing that I would say is that even though we have a pretty cyclical business, generally speaking, the second half is busier than the first half of the year. And that's always been kind of a consistent trend. Things are very busy now. And we are getting pulled into sales opportunities, either directly by customers or through our partners much more regularly. And these opportunities are much larger than they have in the past. So we're very, very optimistic here for 2025.
In terms of your sales force, how long does it usually take to train them?
When it comes to cybersecurity, it's similar to IT services or IT in general. And so it's typically 3 to 6 month ramp time. The terminology in the industry is a J curve. So you typically hire somebody on day one. They're not contributing anything. They're generally going to cost you salary, overhead, etc. And so that's a J curve for the first sort of 4 to 6 months before they get some sales pipeline developed and then start actually closing deals. That's a fairly typical model. I think what we're seeing is that in some cases, reps are ramping faster than that, which I think is both an indication of our ability to source top talent, but also just the fact that we're getting more notoriety now than we have in the past. And so we have a good brand with our customers. who have now seen us execute, or they've seen us execute for other customers, and that's leading to additional business. And so this is a flywheel that I think has been running for the last little while, but it's starting to spin up, and we're excited about it.
The thesis or the plan for your company is to cross-sell or expand your critical services business, which carries higher margin than the VAR business. So I was wondering, how is that going, and what does a pipeline of those critical services contracts look like?
We're measuring it in a couple of different ways. I think the first part that I would say is that there's a VAR platform that we have, which comprises both our existing customers as well as vendors and partners and skills, that has been extremely valuable for us, both to get critical services going and to continue scaling it. And so in some cases that might be an existing customer of ours that we have through the VAR channel that we've sold technology to, and we introduce them to our critical services offering. That's definitely happening. It could also be through our partners that we have through the VAR channel. They're pulling us into new customers, so new logos that we haven't sold to in the past for critical services, and vice versa. So there's a couple of different sales motions that are running. And what I was saying just in the previous answer was, I think the more of this that we do, the more it is continuing to work. So in other words, if a partner pulls us into something, and in fact, we had a situation just a couple of weeks ago, a partner pulled us in, it was a Friday afternoon. They were in a jam. And so they needed our help, and we were able to deliver for them literally over the weekend. And by Monday, they were extremely happy because their problem was solved, the customer's problem was solved. We were able to help, and that has now spawned a number of conversations around future opportunities. So these are repeatable systems that are running. I think the other thing that I would say just is that the breadth of critical services pipeline that we have is building both in terms of breadth but also depth, meaning we are being exposed to a lot more customers now who have heard about us, who have gotten an introduction to us, etc. And so the breadth of customers that we're looking at is continuing, as well as both follow-on work for our existing customers, as well as our VAR customers who, maybe haven't taken the plunge yet, but are starting to consider doing that. So, I mean, we have continued to hire both on the sales side as well as on the delivery side, really to keep up with that demand, and that's something that we're going to continue to do throughout 2025.
Right now we're sitting, and it's March 20, 2024 is behind us, but you didn't report your full year numbers or Q4 numbers. When can investors expect to get that information?
So we're currently trading on the TSX Venture. And so we have roughly till the end of April, which is the filing deadline. We are working towards that. If they are ready earlier, it's certainly something that we could consider putting out. In the interim, we are continuing to press release when we have significant news, whether it's sales contracts or partnerships, and obviously we'll continue to do that up to the end of April.
Previously, you made some press releases about looking into strategic valuations. Maybe you had some mentions of maybe uplisting to NASDAQ. What can you tell my audience about that?
Yeah, so the press release that you're referring to talked about evaluating U.S. strategic options. And I think the reality here is that Plurilock, while we're headquartered in Canada and we trade on the Toronto Stock Exchange Venture, is very much a U.S. company. So we sell U.S. things with U.S. people through our U.S. subsidiaries to U.S. customers. And, it's always been sort of roughly 80 to 90% of our total revenue is in the United States. So it's always been a very U.S. centric story across the board, our customers, our people, etc. I think that there's always a valuation disconnect between the US markets and the Canadian markets. And so the question has always remained, or has always been, is there opportunity to create shareholder value through some sort of transaction in which we take advantage of all of the strengths that we have already in place in the United States. I mean, not to mention a large chunk of our industry advisory councils are American and have very illustrious careers, as I know that we've talked about on previous conversations. So that is something that we have been looking at. I think that we are continuing to do so. I think in particular, announcements like this Wiz acquisition, there's also been a number of acquisitions, even on our comparables table in our investor presentation. A number of those companies have been acquired, and we're continuing to look to see if there are ways of creating shareholder value. Sometimes difficult to measure that externally, but what I would say is that there's a lot of activity internally to investigate that. And if there is a path that makes sense that we believe will create value, absolutely, that's something that we'll consider.
If the path was to get acquired by someone else, can you give us a sense of what are the ranges in valuations that businesses similar to yours can get acquired?
I mean, you could look at acquisition multiples. You could also just look at trading multiples. I mean, if I would encourage folks to go through our investor presentation, towards the end of the presentation, there's a comparables table. And that table lists both. I mean, it looks at other companies who are trading and what their revenue to market cap ratios are. Similarly, there have been a number of takeouts, largely by private equity, which is no surprise to your viewers, I'm sure, because takeout of all technology companies for Canadian listed issuers has also been a trend, not just IT services and cybersecurity. So, generally speaking, some sort of multiple of revenue as opposed to a fraction of revenue, which is where we're trading today, is a trend. Is certainly a trend that you'll see.
Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to get back in touch and have another conversation. I mean, we're very laser focused on operations. As things continue to build for us, we're going to do our best to keep folks up to date. I would encourage two things. If you're not already subscribed, plurilock.com/IR, short for investor relations. If you go there, you can sign up to the email newsletter. The other thing that we've launched this year is a new podcast and YouTube series called Code and Country. So you can go to codeandcountry.fm or Spotify, iTunes, kind of wherever you get your podcasts from. And that's where I'm interviewing some of the foremost leaders of cybersecurity and national security around today's issues. That's included people like the ex-director of the NSA and the ex-director of national intelligence, the former director general at GCHQ in the UK, a number of the Canadian cyber leaders. It's been a very useful series to really educate and inform and better understand the industry that we operate in.
But correct me if I'm wrong. Actually, having a podcast like this is not a bad idea from the marketing point of view of yourself, being able to speak and introduce yourself to some of these speakers.
I think it has a lot of value. I mean, even folks who are in the technology sphere, but maybe not in a technical field, like think of a finance person who might be working in a software company, they're exposed to cybersecurity, but they don't necessarily know the nitty gritty. We certainly are looking to help with that. I think the other thing, you're absolutely correct. When I am speaking with these leaders, it creates opportunity. Absolutely. I mean, just recently, as an example, I was interviewing Chief Information Security Officer of a global organization. And at the end of the interview, he invited me to go visit him and his team. And that's absolutely something I'm going to take him up on. So, those things absolutely happen. But I think that our goal with that series in particular is really to educate and inform, and would encourage your viewers to check it out.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, Ian.
Thank you.